This is Bruce Friedman of Adult Site Broker, and welcome to Adult Site Broker Talk, where each week we interview one of the movers and shakers of the adult industry, and we give you a tip on buying and selling websites. This week we'll be speaking with Mike Stabile of the Free Speech Coalition. ASB Marketplace is the first platform where you can buy and sell adult sites and domains for free. ASB Marketplace allows buyers and sellers the chance to come together on properties that are valued below our company's minimum of $50,000. Don't pay for other marketplaces when ASB Marketplace gives you this service for free. Visit asbmarketplace.com and sign up as a seller or a buyer today. And of course, there's ASB Cash, the first affiliate program for an adult website brokerage, where you can earn as much as 20% of our broker commission referring sellers and buyers to us at Adult Site Broker. Check out asbcash.com for more details and to sign up. Now let's feature our property of the week that's for sale at Adult Site Broker. We're proud to offer for sale a growing and stable European tube network. The sites went online over 10 years ago, and the traffic has grown ever since. All of the traffic is from SEO. No traffic has been purchased. This is a great opportunity for a potential buyer to add to the traffic immediately. Because of the high quality of the content targeted to German and Italian languages, Google has placed the websites in good search positions. There are over 600,000 hosted videos. Around 400,000 of them are uniquely titled. There are also about 6 months of videos already translated and ready to upload, so the new owner will have an easy transition. This is an opportunity for the buyer to get stable traffic and easily grow if they put some effort into new SEO techniques and buy traffic. Because the owner would like a fast sale, he's instructed us to slash the price from the previous $595,000 to only $165,000. Now time for this week's interview. My guest today on Adult Site Broker Talk is Mike Stabile of the Free Speech Coalition. Mike, thanks for being with us today on Adult Site Broker Talk.
Thanks for having me.
Great to have you here. Now, Mike is a journalist and documentary filmmaker who's written about and advocated for sex workers and sexual speech for over a decade. His work has been published in a wide range of places, including the Daily Beast, Salon, BuzzFeed, Playboy, and the New York Times. Seed Money, his documentary on pornographer and philanthropist, that's a hard word, in the morning, Chuck Holmes, was named one of the best documentaries of 2015 by The Advocate. Stabile founded Polari Media to help non-traditional communities and businesses better communicate with a mainstream audience. He's handled communications for the Free Speech Coalition since 2013. By the way, you're doing one heck of a job. The Free Speech Coalition's mission is to protect the rights and freedoms of both the workers and businesses in the adult industry. Their organization functions as a resource, a leader, and a tool for the communities that they serve. They take pride in fighting to alleviate the social stigma, misinformation, and discriminatory policies that affect those who work in and adjacent to the adult industry. For more than 25 years, they've been fighting and winning impossible battles from the Supreme Court to the ballot box and back again. Our industry is almost constantly facing scrutiny and attacks, but we've seen firsthand that when we come together and fight, we win. So, how was that for a commercial for the FSC?
That was great. Thanks for the kind words as well.
Oh, hey, I love what you guys do, and I believe very much in your mission. So how did the FSC first get started?
So it's funny because the FSC got started in an environment not so dissimilar from the one that we face today. It was in the early 90s. The Department of Justice, the FBI, in conjunction with local vice squads, were raiding adult businesses. So, if you remember back in the mid 80s, there had been the Meese Commission report, and the Reagan administration had gone after adult businesses quite
Hmm.
aggressively, in terms of sort of launching a culture war, wanting to take down the growing, at that point, VHS business.
Yeah.
And they instituted, after the report came out, uh, a policy of going after pretty much every big adult business that they could think of, that they could
Hmm.
reasonably bring in. I think that, in the early 90s, they took down what they would do is they would go after an adult business. They wouldn't often be able to get a conviction, right? So sometimes they would go after
Sure.
say that somebody was making films. Obscenity prosecutions are really, really hard. Um, and so they wouldn't necessarily have success. But when the federal government is coming after you, it's tremendously expensive, right? And so
Yeah.
what they would do is they would make it more expensive. They would, they would the FBI would order videotapes to Utah. They'd order videotapes to Alabama. They'd order
Hmm.
it to North Carolina. And then a distributor would send those videotapes out, and they would suddenly launch multiple prosecutions in multiple states. Try to fight the federal government in a court of law, and
Yeah.
you're going to quickly go out of business. You're just not going to have the resources.
Oh
So a
yeah.
lot of businesses just started to.
They don't have to pay their lawyers. We do.
No, absolutely not. And they've got a ton of them.
Yep.
So what we saw was a lot of businesses were starting to just fold and settle.
Yeah.
And the Free Speech Coalition started originally as a legal defense fund
Hmm.
so that people could fight back. So that if they struck one business, that other businesses were, sort of mutual aid society coming to their defense. It meant that they could share resources in terms of lawyers, right? That we could
Yep.
understand how to beat these charges back. So that was how it originally began, as a defense fund. As that the culture shifted, it became a trade organization and
Hmm.
started focusing on, um, not just individual legal battles against individual companies, but against discrimination industry wide, against laws that were discriminated against adult businesses, like the 2257 regulations,
Hmm.
or things like in California, one of our early victories was against a sin tax, which would have levied a 25% tax on adult content. So I think that we really grew as an organization in response to the challenges that were put forward to us. Later, obviously, we would deal with, um, launching a testing system,
Hmm.
to test adult performers, to
Right.
fight HIV/AIDS.
Hmm.
We again dealt with raids in the early 2000s with the Bush administration over 2257 records. We
Yep.
we recently, we even went to the Supreme Court at one point and won an important victory over what we would term sort of barely legal. There had been a law passed in Congress in an omnibus bill saying that if a actor looked underage, that it was child pornography. And so,
Oh, jeez. Yeah. Yeah. I remember that.
so we had to fight a lot of things in order to protect our industry. And today, as I mentioned, we're in the middle of a culture war again, and we're seeing a lot of legislation attacking our industry. So we're feeling that despite the challenges, that we're as vital today as we were 30 years ago.
I agree. Now, it's funny you mentioned the Reagan administration and the Meese Commission. The more I read, and then I think back, and I'm in the middle of Andrew Yang's newest book now. And I don't remember the issue that he was talking about with Reagan on this one. I'm Oh, I do actually. It was I think it had to do with redistricting, if I'm not mistaken. Um, you wonder what the country would be like if there was no Ronald Reagan. You know,
Yeah.
you wonder what the country would look like today if Ronald Reagan had never been president. Hell, I was living in California when he was governor, and he was a terrible governor. And then he ran for president. It's like, by then I was voting. I'm like, I'm not going to vote for this guy. He was an awful governor, and he's going to
Yeah.
be president. Anyway, I digress.
Yeah.
So, how has the FSC's mission evolved over the years?
Well, I think that, we've evolved as the industry has evolved. So I
Hmm.
think that as, as we moved, like I said, from the original fight over individual obscenity prosecutions to really trying to bring the industry into a more reputable place, right? Establishing
Hmm.
standards, trying to coordinate across different companies. Looking and establishing mutual defense so that we sort of understood
Hmm.
what the issues were. And I think that that's something that, again, we still see today. If you look at, there are cases being brought against Pornhub, there's cases being brought against OnlyFans. There's, in multiple districts in
Yep.
multiple states. And what we see is that those companies don't always talk to each other, right?
That's true.
Twitter is being sued under the same law that Pornhub is
Yep.
being sued on.
Yep.
And I think that the role for FSC today really is to try to be a central hub for communication.
Yep.
Um, we've certainly also moved more aggressively in terms of uh, the rights of workers. It was something that was
Hmm.
certainly there at the beginning. Once we became a trade association, we had people who really wanted to talk about how to protect people who were working on set and what their rights would look like. But
Hmm.
as the industry has changed, as performers have become more independent, right? They don't need studios, they don't need agents necessarily. They can
That's
run
true.
their own businesses through platforms like OnlyFans and FanCentro and Just for Fans and the 30 or so platforms that have exploded in the past year.
Only
You know,
30.
I mean, there's a platform for every company at this point. I
Yeah.
don't know one company that I work with or anybody else works with that isn't either running a fan platform or designing one.
Yep.
So you know that is a shift in our mission as well, right? We need to make sure that there are resources for all of these new business owners,
Yep.
that they know how to store model records, that they know how to do their accounting, that they know what legal recourse they have, that they know what the standards are. If you've never been in the industry before and you've never shot anything, but suddenly you have a $10,000 a month OnlyFans account, you may not know about consent checklists. You may not know how to be, an ethical creator. You may not.
Mhm.
It may not be that you don't want to be. It may not be that you're negligent. It may just be that you're not educated. And I think that that's
Right.
one of the roles that we see for Free Speech Coalition going forward is really helping people who are coming into this industry, no matter whether they're in, Australia or Bangkok or London or Los Angeles, that we're there to help them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned record keeping, and I think a lot of people have the misguided thought that because 2257 is now largely a moot point, that they don't need to keep records
hmm Yeah, I think that that was something that people did think. Free Speech Coalition fought. We just ended our
forever.
2257 battle, right? It
Forever.
started
Yes.
in it started 12 or 13 years ago.
Hmm.
Again, with a series of raids where the FBI was going into adult businesses and demanding to see their records. And if a person missed filed something, if it was filed under S rather than T, or they had them in the wrong order, that was a felony under
Yeah.
2257.
Yeah.
2257 was designed to be a tripwire to arrest people when they couldn't get them on obscenity charges. And
Yep.
so we fought those regulations. We battled it for 13 years and eventually defanged them. But what you see, almost at the same time is MasterCard stepping in to issue its own regulations.
Yeah. They're
So
even
I think that you're
worse.
right. Yes, exactly. So you see a lot of people who aren't familiar with 2257 regulations or don't think that they have to keep them, suddenly getting caught and saying, "Oh, wait, I do have to do model releases. I do have to. It's not just enough that I verify or that I, that know that somebody's 18 or that they consent to be in it because they've consented here to be in it. I have to document that."
Hmm.
And again, that's where FSC comes in, both in terms of trying to run interference with Mastercard to let them know what our issues are and
Hmm.
how to design better regulations, but also to educate the community as to what you have to do and what the dangers are if you don't do that.
Hmm. So, how did you get involved in FSC?
I got involved. I'll do you one better. I got involved in the adult industry in the early 2000s. I
Hmm.
had been working in magazines in New York. I had moved back at that point to San Francisco, and was
Oh,
sort
you
of
live in this?
looking.
I didn't even know you lived in the city. It's my
Yeah.
hometown.
I love it.
Go
I think of
Giants!
it exactly. I think of it as my hometown as well, even though I didn't grow up there. It's really sort of my,
Ah,
where
it's
I
awesome.
feel, yeah, such an emotional connection.
Hmm.
Um, and so I'd been living in San Francisco. I moved to New York. I moved back to San Francisco because once you leave California, it can be hard to
Yes.
to stay away. And was sort of looking for work. I was sort of bouncing around, and I had a friend who was doing some freelance work for um, some gay adult companies, sort of handling their press releases and things like that. And he couldn't do it
Hmm.
anymore. And he said, "Oh, do you want some work? You want some sort of freelance work?" And I said, "Sure." So I picked it up, and almost immediately um, felt a kinship. I had
Yeah.
um, it felt like my community. It felt like it was fun.
Sure.
I think that
It's a
I'd grown up in.
family.
It's a family.
It's
It's
the
a
word I
small
always use.
industry.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's people don't take themselves too seriously,
Hmm.
and so I sort of thought of it maybe as like a temporary stop, and started sort of developing products and started sort of eventually pitching articles and writing a little bit more about the industry.
Hmm.
I left in 2009 because I had sort of stumbled across a story that I thought was best told through documentary, and it was about
Hmm.
this gay porn pioneer Chuck Holmes, who founded Falcon Studios and had this sort
Hmm.
of tortured relationship with the Democratic Party. He was a big
Yeah.
funder, but the type of person who he could throw a party, he could have dinner with Gorbachev, but when it came to being invited to some place, he'd be asked to use the back door. That
Yeah.
essentially, right? Like,
Yeah.
he didn't want a pornographer there, though they were happy to take his money. And
Sure.
to me, it was a sort of tragic story of, I mean, it was Gatsby-esque in terms of like you have these yachts, you have these private jets, you have these homes in multiple places, and
Hmm.
all of this luxury, and really what you want is respect.
Yeah.
And that's a story that so many pornographers and people in the sex industry have, which is
And gay people,
and gay
unfortunately.
people,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think that's absolutely it. And
Yes.
so, I sort of wanted to tell this story, and so I'd been working at a company called Naked Sword,
Ah.
running a
Yes.
website.
Our friend Tim.
Our friend Tim Valenti, yes. So I had launched a sort of gay news site called The Sword, and was sort of running that,
Yeah.
and decided I sort of wanted to leave and work on
I
this
didn't know
film.
you started that. That's
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so I took off. I moved to Argentina with a
Hmm.
bunch of film. I'd shot some early interviews and was just trying to play around with what it would, what I could do with it. And and I eventually I came back to the States because it just became harder to. I had to shoot more interviews, and going back and forth wasn't financially feasible.
Yeah.
And I missed having 18 different types of toothpaste in the checkout aisle.
Tell me about it.
Yeah, the expat lament. Um,
Oh yes.
so I did that, and again was sort of doing freelance writing, was trying to figure out what it was. I went and covered the Ira Isaacs obscenity trial
Mhm.
in L.A.
Yeah.
and always had a relationship with FSC. But not a real direct one. I had
Mhm.
worked on various things through Naked Sword through them, and so but I was looking for money for my documentary, and so I was hitting everybody up. And I went in
Hmm.
one day to kink.com. I was in San
Yeah.
Francisco,
Sure.
and I loosely knew Peter, and I was
Yeah.
going in to sort of pitch him on this. Well, if you know any adult business, they never like to give money away, right? But
Yes, I know.
at that time, just happened as I happened to be in there, he got a call from the Huffington Post,
Hmm.
about a potential scandal at the company.
Oh,
and
geez.
something was brewing. Somebody was talking, and he said, I don't really know how to answer these things. And
Hmm.
I said, well, listen, he'd hung up at that point, or I don't know if he'd even taken the call, but I said, tell me what the story is. And he told me the story, and I was like, well, that's entirely reasonable. There's no reason that you should be hiding from this. This is,
Hmm.
you just need to talk frankly about what this is. And
Yeah.
so he said, could you give them a call? And I said,
Hmm.
sure. So I gave them a call,
That's how you became his PR guy.
and that's how I became his PR guy. The
That's
story got
awesome.
killed,
I still want him.
and
I
he's
still want him on the podcast.
Yeah. I
Just to
know.
remind
He's
you.
so he's that's good. I'll remind him. He's knee deep in things right now, but
Okay.
hopefully in the new year he'll start surfacing and sort of be more available for media. So
Okay.
he from then on, they said, "Oh, we could use some help around here." So I needed money, and I said, "I've got to sort of fund this doc, and I'll do it." And that happened to be, and a time when there was just a lot going on at Kink. It was
Hmm.
really in the crosshairs. They were getting ready to. They had worked on a documentary that James Franco had produced that was coming out at Sundance. There were, a number of issues that were happening in the larger adult industry regarding testing and set
Hmm.
safety. And while working with Kink, he sort of contacted FSC and said, "Hey, listen, I think that you should work with Mike. I think that he would
Nice.
help with some of the issues that you're having." And so I started working with FSC, and from there, our relationship really blossomed. I really felt strongly about Free Speech Coalition, about sexual speech, about the rights of sexual minorities, about the rights of workers,
Hmm.
and was adept at communicating that with the mainstream media. And that was
Sure.
something that, coming from a journalistic background, um, felt like I'm in my zone here,
Right.
and I've been there ever since. We've worked on multiple campaigns. We
Hmm.
sort of fought back Prop 60 in California,
Yeah.
and I couldn't be happier.
Awesome. So, what are the greatest threats facing the industry today?
I mean, I think that the greatest. I mean, the same threats that face the industry are the threats that face the entire world at this point, which is sort of misinformation and moral panics.
Hmm.
Um, I think that we are looking at a a culture war that we haven't seen in 20 years, and
Hmm.
maybe haven't seen in 30 years. I think that the closest approximation that we have right now to the sort of multi-pronged fight, and that is, we have legislative battles on Section 230 going on
Yeah.
in the House and Senate. We have age verification regimes being instituted
Hmm.
in the UK and
Yep.
Australia and Germany. We have the evangelical and faith-based groups like Nicosia and Exodus Cry pressuring the banks to deplatform companies
Freaks.
like Pornhub and OnlyFans. Yeah, I mean, it's I've never seen it this aggressive. I think that
No.
I often think that last year being 2020, right?
Right.
Um,
And
you know,
I should point out we're doing this in December of 2021, so this will run in the spring of 2022. Go
okay.
ahead.
So in early 2020, I started watching. I monitor hundreds of publications a day, so I'm going
Mm.
through in the morning and
Wow.
looking through all of these things. Mostly you're sort of scanning headlines and things like that. But I've a
Hmm.
pretty aggressive monitoring service that will click in and say I've got to read this. And so I would see this stuff bubbling up about Trafficking Hub and these claims being made about Pornhub, and I thought, God, this is just so idiotic, right? Like, this is so
Stupid.
misguided. It's not based in fact. It's not based in anything statistics. It's just sort of these evangelical groups running a censorship campaign, right? That we've
Yeah, they're
seen this
trying to get
over
rid
and
of
over again.
porn. Sure.
Exactly. And I didn't really take it seriously. And in retrospect, it was a mistake. And I don't think anybody took it seriously. I think that we all just thought it was a bunch of jokers. Cut to a year ago. this week, and Nick Kristof in the New York Times
Oh
publishes.
God.
Um,
I canceled my subscription, by the way, after that second article, just to let you know.
yeah,
And I sent the New York Times a message, like they care. I sent the New
yeah.
York Times a message telling them why I canceled my subscription.
Good for you. Good for
Yeah.
you. I mean,
Well,
it.
fight back. The only thing you got
The only
as a
thing,
tool
yeah,
is your money. You vote with your money. So
yeah, absolutely. And they had put out that article where he had sort of platformed Nkosi and Exodus Cry, did
the
not identify
children,
them
the
as
children of Pornhub.
the
Yes, I
children of
recall.
Pornhub.
Fucker,
Lila Micklethwait, the sexual trafficking activist,
bitch.
and Danny
Sorry.
Pinter, yeah, the legal analyst. It was so consciously done to sort of strip them of their faith based roots,
Hmm.
and to present this story as if this was an activist story as opposed to a story of censorship. And of course, Nick Kristof
Yeah.
has a long history, a long tortured history, of conflating sex work and sex trafficking, of savior syndrome, and everything else,
Yeah.
and of wanting to sort of shut down.
He's a grandstander.
Yeah, exactly. Um, God bless Oregon, where he's running for governor.
Oh yeah, yeah. I heard about that. I wish I could vote against him in Oregon. Oh well, I know people there.
Yeah, there's an active sex worker community, so I'm hoping that they take care of him.
Oh sure.
So uh, yeah. So I mean, this you did take it seriously. This sort of gets whitewashed, and then all of a sudden you see Visa and Mastercard withdrawing support from Pornhub, and you see everybody else
Hmm.
freaking out. And I think that one of the things that we realized this year, and it is just how tenuous our relationship is with the financial services sector,
Yeah,
and how brutal it is to lose it. If you lose Visa or Mastercard, you lose your business, and
absolutely.
it's something that's always been an issue. I remember, even going back when I was working on the documentary about Chuck Holmes, he couldn't get a loan from the bank, right? He couldn't get a
Hmm.
loan for his business. He couldn't get bank accounts, and this is back in the '80s. Today, obviously, sex workers face that same level of discrimination. They get
Yep.
kicked off of PayPal. They get their funds seized on Venmo. FSC tried to open a second bank account this year and was told by our bank that we won't take it. You're an adult business. And we
Jeez.
said, but we've already got an account with you. And they said, well, I'd be quiet about it if I were you. It's just
Exactly.
it's just that level of discrimination that we face. I think that this year brought it into sharper relief, and we're not the only ones that knew that. I mean, I think that one of the things that I've realized as I've gone back over the past year, and as FSC and our legislative committee and our various uh, partner organizations that we work with, have discovered is that groups like Nicosi, the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, formerly Morality and Media, know is that banks are our weak point, and
Oh
they're
sure.
exploiting that. And
Sure.
so, I was looking back, and the president of Nicosi, until I think a month ago, was a guy named Patrick Truman. And Patrick Truman, as I sort of dug back, was the head of the task force, the obscenity task force in the Department of Justice in the
Oh
late
no.
'80s, early '90s,
Oh
who
wow.
went after adult businesses. Right?
Crazy.
He doesn't believe it's Christian. He doesn't believe that we have a right to do it. He believes that it's all exploitation. He doesn't believe that adult content is protected by the First Amendment. And
Jeez.
in realizing that, I, also realized that the strategy that they have right now is the same strategy that they had in the '80s and '90s. So in the '80s and the '90s, what it was multiple prosecutions, in and sort of denying you access to funds. So
Yep.
they would seize your bank accounts. They would come at you from a bunch of different angles, and knew that it would take a lot of energy and resources for you to defend yourself against it. That's the same strategy they're taking today. They're using
Yeah.
different mechanisms, but they're going after your banks, right?
Sure.
They're
Going after our
going
money.
after you. Exactly. They're filing multiple lawsuits. There's multiple lawsuits that Nicosia has sponsored against Pornhub, right? They're trying this strategy to really drain the business and essentially make them, give up. Say it's too much work. We're going to go into something else. And so,
Yeah.
um, it once you understand their strategy, it's a little bit better because at least you understand how to react to them. I wish that I had made the connection a little bit earlier,
Sure.
and that the industry had been a little bit more on high alert. I tend to be a little bit of a chicken little as it is, so not everybody listens. But in this case, I wish I had yelled a little bit louder.
Always. So, why do you think we're seeing such a backlash against adult content around the world?
I think that we're seeing a backlash because we've been so successful. If you think back to the 80s or 90s or even the early 2000s, when there was a battle over, a pornography, as becoming sort of more mainstream, right? This idea that like, oh, it's becoming more prevalent. People can see it. What does this mean? We should restrict access to it. We should bring them up on obscenity charges. We should do all of this stuff. We've won that battle. There
Yeah,
isn't a there. We don't see obscenity prosecutions happening anymore. Even under the Trump administration, we didn't see any.
that's true.
2257 has been
They were
spanked.
too busy getting in their own way.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Pornhub is, Pornhub was a household word, right? People
Yeah.
talk about porn. Women talk about porn.
Yep.
We talk about ethical porn. We talk about
Right.
anal, on the news. And so I think that the conservative Christians were really at a loss, in terms of having lost this culture war. And so I think that this is a deeply reactionary movement,
Sure.
an attempt to say like, oh my God, I can't believe that it's gotten this bad. And I think that it's not just related to porn. I think that this is a reactionary movement in terms of the progress of the gay and lesbian community and the trans community. I think that these were all things that over the past 5 years really had people, especially in conservative, socially conservative circles, wondering like, what's going on with our world, right? We're losing
Mhm.
our primacy, we're losing our power, and this is an articulation of it. I think that on a more specific level, as I went back and sort of traced the trafficking hub movement and traced the sort of the rise of anti-porn, what I've
Mhm.
seen is that it ties in almost exactly with the pandemic.
Mhm.
And I think that there was, if I, this is just sort of loose speculation, you know,
Sure.
but what you see is that when the pandemic happens, you see a tremendous number of news stories about how people are logging on and watching porn. You
Oh,
even see
yeah.
public health departments saying, "Oh, you should watch porn. It's better than going out and having sex. This is a natural, way to relieve
Sure.
tension and all the rest of it." There's lots of
Nobody ever caught COVID from their computer
exactly, and
or
at
their
the same
phone.
time, everybody is home alone or is home with their family, right?
Yeah.
And so there's this feeling of or greater attention to what is my kid doing in the bedroom? What is
Mhm.
my college student son doing with the door closed? What's my husband doing so long in the bathroom? What's my wife doing? While I'm not there, or while I'm cooking dinner or whatever it is. I think that I think there was this sort of this magic brew of all of this is going on, and then a general cultural anxiety around sex and sexuality in the household. And I think that
Yeah.
it helped it sort of gain traction where it hadn't before. I think
Yeah.
that I think that when you look at how it all plays out, it matches so closely that I think that there has to be something because people are always trying this. This is not the newest argument that we've had,
No.
right?
We
Like there have been conservative Christians who have been advocating against pornography for years, but
Mhm.
I do think that there was something about the pandemic that really gave it a little power and allowed it sort of to, not to use a too much of a on the nose COVID metaphor, but escape its old host and
Mm.
sort of go into a new population.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
here we are.
And they had too much time on their hands, I think. So,
Yeah.
what's the
Well, they also had a
FSC?
lot of.
Sorry.
I should also somebody no.
Go ahead.
Someone also mentioned that one of the things that happened during the pandemic with the relief bills is that the cap
Mhm.
got lifted on donate on charitable donations,
Mhm.
um, and for people who were donating more than 50% of their AGI. What we saw during the pandemic was that donations to these organizations skyrocketed.
Yeah.
This is a cash cow. Nkosi was really wandering in the wilderness for years, right? Their big
Sure.
victory in the past 5 or 10 years was getting Cosmo removed from the Walmart checkout line. They were not a relevant organization. Um, but once they sort of moved into sort of this idea of anti-trafficking, of child porn, they really hit it. And by I think their revenue in the between want to say like 2018 and 2020 tripled. They're just making so
Sure.
much more money than they were before, and
Yeah.
that puts them in a better position to do these types of things.
Yeah, that's very true. So, what is the FSC doing to fight back?
So, we're I mean, what aren't we doing at this point?
Mhm.
It is a long day every day.
Mm.
We are a small staff,
Yep.
and we have a lot of volunteers, including often me. We immediately in late 2020 immediately got on the phone with Pornhub, tried to understand what was going on and on their side and how
Mhm.
we could support it. By January, we had launched a legislative committee to deal with the spate of new bills that were coming in against Section 230. We
Mhm.
began sort of monitoring these groups a lot more and meeting weekly to sort of talk about what had gone on, comparing notes with performers in terms of what they're seeing, talking with studios as to what they're seeing. Um, and just improving the lines of communication. One thing that happened in COVID is that we all got siloed, right? We didn't have as
Mhm.
many places where we were communicating. At the same time, it also enabled things like Zoom. So once we got our sea legs, we've been much more aggressive. I was on the phone on a Zoom call this morning with sex worker activists in Australia. Understanding what's going on with their Online Safety Act and how that ties in to the legislation that's being introduced in the UK and to the evangelical movement in the US. So we're starting to
Mhm.
draw all of these connections. I think that um, we've hired federal lobbyists for the first time in over a decade.
Yeah, I heard
Uh,
about that. That's awesome.
and responded to when Representative Ann Wagner of Missouri sent a letter to she sent two letters actually to the Department of Justice, or one to the Department
Yeah.
of Justice and one to FinCEN, calling for an investigation into OnlyFans. We responded. We sent a letter to Merrick Garland last month, outlining just how wrong this is. We also sent it to 100 members of Congress who had signed on to her letter and said, we needed to come in and talk with you because this is bullshit. This isn't true. This isn't representative of the industry, and this isn't
Yep.
accurate. So we're fighting back on at just about every level. We had meetings with Mastercard in June.
Mhm.
We have been talking with banking, with payment processors and things like that, and also trying to just get the adult industry to understand that this isn't about one or two companies. I think that one thing that you saw when Pornhub first went down, or I shouldn't say went down, but when it was, when it was attacked, was that there were a number of people who didn't feel so feel kindly about Pornhub, and so they thought,
Mhm.
well, this big competitor's gone. What do I care? And I think that we also saw that a bit with OnlyFans, right? There were
Yeah,
a lot of people who said, "Oh,
very
well, too
true.
bad for them,"
A lot of
but you
a
know,
lot of jealousy when people are on the top, I think.
yeah, exactly. And I think that I don't want to take away from what people feel. Right? These are companies that really dominate the space. So
Yes.
you're
And
constantly
there's
resentful.
let's face it, there's long-standing resentment towards
Yeah.
big tube sites.
Yes.
And
Yeah. For sure.
there's a lot of people who still bitch about it instead of choose to work with them. Those that are
Yeah.
still in business.
Yeah, and I understand that entirely. And what we've been trying to say is that this is beyond that. Like this isn't, the inner family battles have to stop. What we
Mhm.
have to
I
understand is that
agree.
they're
Oh god,
not
I agree.
what they do about Pornhub isn't going to just affect Pornhub. It's going to
No.
affect you.
Yep.
And I think that we're making that case. I think people are finally realizing it. The other thing that we do is that we talk to the media constantly. So
That's
we
good.
are on the horn, calling up the Washington Post, yelling at the New York Times.
I like the way you put those 2.
I mean, it is, and I want to be in as many places as possible, even if they're
Yep.
hostile, because I think that you might read an article that's overwhelmingly hostile, but if there's no contrary opinion in there, there's no chance that you're going to change your mind.
You're
So
right.
I think that if at least we can get a quote in where we're disputing something, even if it's in, you know, the Daily Caller or, you know, the BBC,
Hmm.
which has become so incredibly hostile to sex work and porn that
Yeah.
it's almost unrecognizable. I want to be there. I want to be there making a contrary opinion in the same way that, you know, I think that I did as sort of a young gay activist, which was to say,
Mm-hmm.
listen, I'm happy. Whatever lies you're telling about my community, I want to stand in opposition and say that's not how I feel. I'm not
No, you're
sad.
right.
I'm not depressed. I'm not degraded. I'm happy and proud of who I am. That's
Yes.
how I feel about the adult industry today. Is that I want to be there and say, as a testament to what they're saying isn't true. Here's somebody who is reasonable, who can talk about these things, who can understand what the challenges are, you know, that we face online in regards to things like revenge porn and CSAM, and that we take
Mm-hmm.
them seriously. That this isn't a
Yeah.
flagrant, you know, Wild West.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. Maybe you guys need to have a campaign, an adult industry pride campaign. I think that's something that
Yeah.
no, I'm serious. I think
No,
that's
I think
something we all need to be more proud of.
absolutely, and I think that it's, you know, as I just launched, you know, we're launching a fundraising team and
Hmm.
working with creators on sort of new ideas as to how we can do it, or how we can sort of bring in more money. But when I thought about, you know, what is my dream goal with this industry and with this organization, you know, what would we be doing? And
Right.
obviously it would be, I want to be at every hearing, right? I want to be
Yeah.
talking to Parliament. I want, or, you know, or I want someone from the industry talking to Parliament. I want, you
Right.
know, I want white papers. I want, you know, analysis. I want to be able to fight back with data and with facts. Though I
Hmm.
understand that facts and data are increasingly irrelevant in this world. You
Yeah.
know, but you know, the other thing that we look at is that we want to be involved in a media campaign, right? You want to
Hmm.
be able to do what Pornhub used to do with, um, you know, with their billboards in Times Squares, and get so much press. But
Always crack
why
me up.
can't we do that for issues that matter to us? You know, the
Yep.
issues of
Oh,
sex
we
work
can.
and
We
rights, and
can.
that's and with enough money we can.
That's right. It all comes down to money. It always does. What can individuals in the industry do to get involved in the fight?
Well, I think that the first thing is the to take it seriously and follow it. Right. This is
Hmm.
understand that this affects you and your livelihood.
Yep.
That if these companies go down, especially if you're a creator, you're going down. Right.
You're
Your
right.
income is going to drop. If banking discrimination gets worse, your issue is going to get worse. So
Yep.
I want people involved in that. Obviously, I want them to donate to FSC or at least
Hmm.
become FSC members. You know,
Right.
even for $5 or $10 a month, that becomes something that sustains us and allows us to do this work. But I also just want
Sure.
people to get involved. You know, I mean, I interact with so many people on Twitter, and have met so many people from so many different areas of the fight. You know, full service sex workers, free speech activists, technologists. You
Hmm.
know, and you really want people who, you know, we had a research team meeting for the first time, for a new research team meeting, we expanded it and put out a call for people who were interested in sort of doing research. And it was so wonderful to see people from all over the industry say, "Hey, listen, I want to take a look at scientific studies." Somebody else saying, "I want to look at, you know, I want to look at this group's tweets." Someone else saying, you know, "I want to write it, you know, an op-ed." These are the things that we need. People, we just don't have. We're never going to have enough people to do it all ourselves. You know, from FSC, we're only going to succeed in this if we have the entire community involved.
So, Mike, talk about Polari Media. Give us a little bit about what you do there.
Well, you know, Polari Media was a firm I founded, you know, when I was working on my documentary and starting to
Hmm.
work with adult companies, and other sort of marginalized groups, so sex educators, LGBTQ groups, and artists and things like that, to help them access the mainstream media to get
Hmm.
their message out. Polari is a term that comes from sort of late 19th century
Hmm.
British slang,
Okay.
that was used by sex workers and dock workers and the queer community to communicate amongst themselves,
Interesting.
um, to avoid law enforcement. So a lot of the words that we think of today is very common, like drag and camp, were early Polari words.
Interesting.
And so I thought of that as I had always sort of been fascinated as a linguistic history, and it seemed to fit sort of what I was doing, which was trying to find ways for these groups that had been marginalized to better communicate.
Yeah.
And so I founded this business, and it's always been something where I never really had to go after clients. I
Right.
often, I'm a bad business person, and, and so have always been, almost trying to lose clients so that I could have more time to do the work that I want to do.
Yeah.
But it's there's always a tremendous need in this industry. There's always people,
Yeah.
whether it's people who want to reach the mainstream media for, to get their brand out or something like that, or
Hmm.
whether it's somebody who is, getting attacked in the mainstream media and needs to understand how to fight back.
Right. Which is how you
I
started.
have done a ton of which is how I started, and it's still sort of
Yeah.
where what I love to do.
Right.
I love to be in a fight in that way,
Hmm.
and I love to be able to come to somebody's defense.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That's why you're with
that was sort of how I
that's why
started
you're
it,
with sorry, that's why you're
and
with
that's why I'm with
FSC.
FSC. Yeah, yeah,
So
absolutely.
what are you most proud of with your participation in the adult industry?
I mean, I think that in terms of pride, I really think that our battle over Prop 60 in 2015
Yep.
was pivotal. This was a mandatory condom
Yeah.
legislation. It was a ballot measure that would have forced performers to use condoms, or they would have faced potential civil lawsuits from consumers. So
Hmm.
if the way that the way that the law had been structured was that if they were mad that nobody was using condoms, right? They were
Such a
despite the fact that it was
California
a
thing, huh?
yeah, exactly, right. And so they didn't care about the testing system. They didn't care about this, and largely Cal OSHA, the regulators, didn't care about it, right?
Hmm.
I mean, in terms of they weren't concerned with the adult industry because the adult industry has done a really great job of self-regulating. But there are
Yes.
always going to be moralists who are concerned, what message is this sending to our kids, right? That was
Hmm.
essentially where it came from. And what and if you put something on the ballot that says shouldn't sex workers or shouldn't porn stars use condoms, well, everyday people are going to say, "Oh yeah, I think that makes that's a good point. They should do that."
Yep.
That would be helpful. It was pitched as a worker protection measure,
Yeah.
except that in this case the workers hated it.
Yeah.
They said, we get tested every 14 days. When I shoot with a
Mhm.
condom, it's much more difficult.
Right.
I can't shoot as much. It's harder on my body. Condoms aren't
Yeah.
meant for these sets where we're shooting for 3 hours. You don't know what you're talking about. Um, and to deal with the recalcitrant performers, right? I think they thought they were going to come in as liberators. I think they
Yeah.
had this idea. AHF, which was the organization, AIDS Healthcare Foundation, thought they were going to come in and
Oh, yeah.
porn stars were going to embrace them because they had just been, subjected to, oppression by these studios. They
Mhm.
didn't find that. And so the way that they designed the legislation was that they allowed citizens to sue, much in the way that we see right now in Texas with the abortion law, right?
Yeah.
They what the government couldn't do, they were going to empower citizens to do. They're going to empower them to bring
Ridiculous.
civil lawsuits. So if you saw a film without a condom in it, you could sue the producer. The problem is that in many of these cases, in almost all cases, performers were also creating their own content. So
Right.
this left a way for fans and stalkers and anybody to harass them, right? To bring them into court, to have to be able to see
Mhm.
them. And so this was something that when the bill was first introduced, when the ballot measure was first introduced, it was 75% support in the in the state of California.
Jeez.
In early polling, um, we barnstormed the state, and
You did.
we talked to every editorial board. We got the Democrats on our side. We got the Republicans on our side. We got the Libertarians on our side. We got the ACLU on our side. We got the Chamber of Commerce on our side. We got everybody that could possibly get on our side. And within the course of 4 or 5 months, we turned that into a victory for us. We were able to
Yeah.
beat it back, and it was
Awesome.
tremendous. So I'm tremendously proud of that. I'm also just tremendously proud right now to be what I'm doing in terms of fighting back this anti-porn movement. It's something that I have, I found distasteful when I was coming of age,
Yep.
and in the early '90s, and it's something that I'm glad to be in this fight today. This is a historic moment, and it's as difficult as it is and challenging, and as much as I wish it weren't here,
Yeah.
I'm relishing the chance to sort of beat them back.
It's funny you mentioned, to keep their kids safe and give their kids the right idea. Their kids shouldn't be watching porn.
No, no, and that's the thing that's so paradoxical about this whole process is that the most effective way to stop your kids from watching porn or stop your kids from accessing porn is to be involved in their devices and be involved in their life, right?
Yep.
You can block porn on Pornhub, right? You can take down
Yes.
all of Pornhub. You could make mandatory age verifications. Kids are going to
Yep.
get a VPN. They're going to go to a different country. They're
That's
going to go to a
right.
file sharing site. They're going to go all these things.
They're
Where
smarter than
you
we
are
are.
much, they're smarter. You can be much more effective with filters on your devices, right? With at like
Yep.
that are going because all adult sites register with those devices. So
Yep.
if you turn on a filter and you put it password protected, it's not going to be able to access Pornhub. It's not going to be able to
Yep.
access X videos. It's not going to be able to access OnlyFans.
Right.
And you can monitor this world. They're your kids. This is your responsibility. You
Correct.
can even block it at the ISP level so that when they're accessing Wi-Fi, they can't access it.
Yeah.
It's going to be much more effective. But people don't want to hear that. People want
Mhm.
to hear that there's a magic solution that they're going to take down these
Yeah.
adult sites. I think that I hear arguments I get with anti-porn groups, and they say, well, it's like liquor. Kids can't just go into a liquor shop and
Right.
buy liquor, and they need to do age verification. I was like, but they can go into your cabinet and drink liquor.
Yep.
And so this stuff is going to be everywhere, right? They could that this isn't going to be something that is done just by we passed age verification for liquor and no kids ever access it.
Right.
No, it's not we understand that this is something that you have to talk to kids about. You have to monitor their behavior. You have to observe it,
Yep.
and you have to keep it out of sight. You have to keep it so that they
Correct.
can't access it. And there's always going to be people who are going to try to get around that. But an involved parent can be much more effective
Yeah.
than the government
Yeah.
can.
Good luck. Good luck with that in
I
2022.
know.
Well, Mike, I'd like to thank you for being our guest today on Adult Site Broker Talk. It was fascinating, and I hope we'll get a chance to do it again really soon.
Thanks so much, Bruce. I really, really appreciate it.
My broker tip today is part 4 of what to do to make your site more valuable for when you decide to sell it later. Trademark your site. Having a trademark instantly protects your brand and makes your site more valuable when it comes time to sell it. Trademarking your site will cost an average of about $1,500, but should be more than worth the investment when it comes time to sell it. Show buyers ways you feel the site can make more money in the future. This includes showing them future plans you may have, traffic trends, as well as sales trends. If things are growing and you can show them how to grow it more, they are likely to be willing to pay more for the site. Do something unique with your site. If you have competitors, figure a way to do it better. Be different in some distinguishable way that makes you better. Your members will notice and spend more money with you. Make your site a place that people want to visit, not just to buy things or view porn. Be creative, not just one of many. Keep thinking outside the box and make positive changes on your site. Think like a buyer when planning or updating your site. Don't think like a tech. Think like the consumer. We'll talk about this subject more next week. And next week, we'll be speaking with Jack Polo of Muck Media. And that's it for this week's Adult Site Broker Talk. I'd once again like to thank my guest, Mike Stabile of the Free Speech Coalition. Talk to you again next week on Adult Site Broker Talk. I'm Bruce Friedman.